I stood at the checkout line, hands shaking as I reached for a purse that wasn't there. Behind me, the line grew restless, the cashier hesitant, groceries bagged, unpaid. I called my daughter, my voice low, embarrassed. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even pause. "Figure it out yourself, old woman," she said before hanging up. Old woman. Not mom. Not even Martha. Just old. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Martha Jennings stood in the produce aisle of Carson's Market, gently squeezing a Roma tomato like it held some secret answer. Her knuckles ached from the morning chill, even inside the store, and her cart, carefully filled with chicken thighs, denture cleaner, instant coffee, and a single sleeve of Oreos, creaked as she nudged it forward. It was Friday. Pension deposit day, grocery day, her rhythm. The purse had been on her shoulder the whole time. She was sure of it. She reached for her wallet at the register, already rehearsing her polite chit-chat with Darren, the cashier she liked, when her hand met nothing. Not the soft zipper pull she knew by heart. Not the leather she'd conditioned every 6 months since she bought it on sale at Macy's 10 years ago. Her breath caught. She patted her coat pocket, twice, then her sweater, then scanned the floor around her feet. Empty. Cold air from the front door blew across her shoes like an afterthought. "Everything okay, Ms. Jennings?" Darren's voice was kind, but cautious. A line had formed behind her. Someone coughed. Someone else sighed. "My purse," she murmured. "I had it when I came in." "I know I did. Want me to check the customer service desk?" he asked, already hitting a button. Martha shook her head. Her mind raced. She hadn't let the cart out of her sight. She hadn't even gone to the restroom. Not today. It had been right there. She reached for her phone. No purse. No phone. Her chest tightened. "Do you want to call someone?" Darren offered, pointing to the store phone near the register. "Take your time." She nodded, moved stiffly to the phone, and dialed Anna's number by memory. It rang twice. "Yeah?" her daughter answered flatly. "Anna, it's Mom. My purse has been stolen. I'm at Carson's. I need—" "Seriously?" Anna cut in. "I'm on my way to Pilates. Can't Kyle swing by later?" "I can't pay for the groceries. I don't have my keys. My phone." "Oh my God, Mom. This is exactly why we told you to start using that wrist wallet thing Grace gave you." Martha's throat tightened. "Anna, you'll figure it out," Anna snapped. "You always do. I've got to go." Bye, click. The silence that followed felt colder than the wind outside. She stood there, hand still on the receiver, as if willing her daughter's voice to return, this time softer, more concerned. It didn't. Darren gently cleared his throat. "It's okay," Martha said quietly, gathering what remained of her dignity. "Just put the groceries back. I'll come back Monday." He looked unsure. "You've shopped here for, what, 10 years? Just take 'em. Pay next time. It's fine." She looked at him, really looked. A young man with a tattoo sneaking up his neck and a soft spot where judgment should have been. She nodded once. Outside, the wind had picked up, blowing leaves across the sidewalk like tiny messengers of chaos. She stood there, arms full of double-bagged groceries, unsure what to do. She didn't even have enough cash for a bus ride. A maroon sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. The passenger window rolled down. "Get in, before you freeze your ass off." Betty Harper, sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky, and a lit cigarette dangling from her mouth like punctuation. Martha slid in, setting the bags between her feet. Her hands were trembling now, the adrenaline finally catching up. "I don't even know how it happened," she whispered. "I was so careful." Betty handed her a thermos of something hot and sweet. "I'll tell you what happened. You raised a damn narcissist who couldn't find compassion with both hands and a flashlight." Martha tried to smile, but the corners of her mouth wouldn't cooperate. "I called her," she said softly. "I told her I needed help. And she told you to go to hell." Martha nodded, then turned to the window. Columbus looked so gray in fall. Even the trees seemed embarrassed to hold their leaves. They drove in silence for a few blocks before Betty pulled into Martha's apartment lot and cut the engine. The sudden absence of noise made everything feel louder. Martha cradled the thermos between her hands. Her voice came slow, deliberate. "This isn't about a purse," she said finally, staring straight ahead. "It's about respect." Betty leaned back, exhaled smoke toward the cracked window. Then maybe it's time someone earned some. Martha's phone had been in that purse, her bank card, her ID, her Medicare info, her entire life in one zippered rectangle, and someone now had it. The next morning, Martha was stirring her coffee with the back of a butter knife when the landline rang. She flinched. Almost no one called the landline anymore. Mrs. Jennings? A calm male voice said. This is Mike from Ohio Federal Credit Union's fraud department. We've detected a few unusual transactions on your account overnight. Can I verify a few charges with you? Martha's stomach knotted. She set the knife down gently. Yes, go ahead. He read them off, one by one. A liquor store in Short North, a gas station in a zip code she didn't recognize, a boutique clothing store called Savage Violet that sounded more like a rock band than a retailer. I didn't make any of those, she said, her voice cracking on the last word. We're going to freeze your card immediately, Mike said. A report will be filed with local law enforcement, and they'll be in contact within 24 hours. You'll receive an affidavit packet in the mail. It's standard protocol. She thanked him and hung up, staring at the black rotary handset like it had personally betrayed her. The world outside her window remained indifferent. Cars droning down High Street, a kid skateboarding past the mailbox. But something had shifted. A thread had been pulled, and her life was starting to unravel. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Tall, broad-shouldered, late 30s or early 40s, the man wore jeans, a gray Columbus PD windbreaker, and an expression that said, I've seen this before, and it never gets easier. Mrs. Jennings, he asked, flashing a badge. I'm Detective Ryan Cole. Mind if I come in? Martha opened the door wider and motioned him inside. The heat from the radiator hissed softly behind them. Got the report from your bank this morning, he said, pulling out a small leather notebook. We're looking at possible identity theft, which means this goes beyond just your missing purse. Martha sat down slowly on the edge of her recliner. What does that mean? Exactly? Cole was matter of fact, but not unkind. If someone has your ID, your bank info, your Medicare card, they can open new accounts, reroute payments, even file fake tax returns in your name. You could be dealing with weeks, sometimes months, of damage control. Martha took a breath, slow and steady. All right, she said. What do we do next? He paused. That wasn't the response he usually got. I'll need a list of all cards and documents that were in the purse. You'll also want to notify Social Security, the DMV, and your Medicare provider. Martha nodded, her eyes scanning the desk in the corner. She stood, pulled open a drawer, and took out a spiral-bound notebook with a floral cover. Let's start here, she said, flipping to a fresh page. Cole raised an eyebrow. You're organized. That helps. She gave a tired smile. Habit of a postal worker. 17 years of never losing a package. Just then, a shrill laugh echoed down the hallway. Martha's head snapped toward the window, slightly ajar. The sound drifted in clearly from the apartment next door. Anna's voice, unmistakable. Mom thinks she was robbed, Anna said mockingly. She probably left her purse in the frozen peas and blamed the cashier. Another voice, Kyle's, mumbled something inaudible. Cole raised his eyebrows. Martha quietly stood and shut the window. Her hand didn't shake. Not this time. That laugh was still ringing in her ears when Betty arrived with a bag of warm bagels and a harder truth. Don't let this go, Martha, she said, folding her coat neatly over the arm of the couch. You want your daughter to wake up one morning feeling guilty? She won't. People like Anna, they only understand consequences. Martha nodded slowly, tapping her pen against the notebook. One line at the top. Saturday, 9:47 a.m. Fraud debt. Called charges. Not mine. Then another. Detective Ryan Cole. Badge 1147. Says risk is identity theft. She kept writing, the letters sharp and measured, each line a refusal to disappear. Detective Ryan Cole leaned over Martha's kitchen table, his finger tracing the address line on a printed transaction report. This one here, he said, tapping twice. Purchase at $342.80. Card was swiped at a boutique on 7th Avenue. That's in the University Heights area. Martha blinked. That's where Anna lives. He nodded slowly. I can't say for certain who used it yet, but that zip code, the timestamp, the store, it's a cluster. It doesn't look random. She looked down at her notebook, pen hovering. Her handwriting was neat, but her hand trembled. She scribbled, Sunday 10:15 a.m. Charge traced to Anna's neighborhood. Coincidence? her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. "I'm not asking you to accuse your daughter," Cole said, reading her silent. "But if someone in her household has access to your purse, your info, that narrows the possibilities." "I understand," Martha replied, voice low. "And I won't accuse anyone. Not yet." Later that afternoon, Grace sat cross-legged on Martha's carpet, her boots still dusted with the September chill. Her fingers plucked at the hem of her hoodie, distracted. "I shouldn't say anything," she began. "You can always say something here," Martha replied, pouring her granddaughter a mug of chamomile tea she doubted the girl would drink. Grace hesitated. "Mom had a new purse yesterday. Red. Designer-looking. She was showing it off to Aunt Libby on FaceTime. Said Kyle got it for her. But he looked, I don't know, weird." "Weird how?" Martha asked. Grace shrugged. "Like he wanted to leave the room." Martha's breath slowed. Steady. "Thank you, sweetheart. That helps." She scribbled again. Grace reports, "Anna has new red designer purse. Claims Kyle bought it." Kyle uncomfortable. Grace looked up. "Grandma, is this really bad?" Martha's smile was soft, worn. "It might be, but bad doesn't mean helpless." Monday, 4:20 p.m., Martha knocked on Anna's apartment door. It swung open a beat later. "Mom?" Anna asked, surprised. Her smile was immediate, but so was the flicker in her eyes like a poker player mid-bluff. "Everything okay?" Martha offered a small smile. "Just checking in. Haven't seen you since the grocery store mess." Anna stepped aside to let her in, brushing her hair off her shoulder with a deliberate, practiced flick. The red purse was hanging from a brass hook by the kitchen, structured, glossy, expensive-looking. The tag still dangled from its handle. "Nice bag," Martha said casually. "Oh, thanks," Anna replied quickly. "Early birthday gift." Kyle surprised me. Kyle, sitting on the couch, turned his head just slightly. His eyes met Martha's for a second too long. Then he looked away. Martha sat down gently on the edge of the ottoman, scanning the room with a stillness that felt like strategy. "So how's work?" she asked Anna. Anna blinked. "Busy. My new manager's a nightmare." Martha nodded. "Must be hard. Especially with everything going on." Anna's smile wavered. "What do you mean?" Martha stood. "Just that it's a lot to handle. Kids, job, life, money. Especially these days." Anna's tone turned sharp. "Are you implying something?" "Not at all," Martha replied calmly. "Just visiting my daughter." She gave Kyle a long, quiet glance. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but closed it again. When Martha left, she didn't say goodbye. She closed the door softly behind her, then wrote in her notebook on the steps outside. "Observed red purse. New. Expensive. Tag still attached. Anna says Kyle bought it." Kyle unconvincing. No reaction to mention of bank activity. Back at home, she read over her notes with Betty beside her. Betty had brought over a slice of banana cream pie and her usual bluntness. "You're building something here," Betty said, fork tapping the edge of the ceramic plate. "Don't rush it. Don't scream. Don't accuse." Martha looked up. "Then what?" "Don't argue," Betty said firmly. "Build proof." Martha closed the notebook. The weight of it in her hand no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a weapon. The fluorescent lights inside the East 5th Avenue DMV buzzed like they had a personal grudge. Martha stepped through the metal detector with Detective Cole beside her, the air stale with the scent of paper, sweat, and bureaucracy. She clutched her coat tighter even though the room was warm. The line was long. No one made eye contact. A young woman behind the counter with silver nails and tired eyes glanced up when Cole flashed his badge. "We're looking into a possible ID fraud involving this woman," he said, nodding toward Martha. "We need to check the last license activity connected to her number." The woman typed with long, practiced fingers, her brows arched. "Last attempt was 2 days ago," she said. "Renewal application flagged. Signature didn't match the one on file." It triggered a hold. Martha felt something jolt behind her ribs. They tried to renew it?" "Yep," the clerk said, chewing gum mid-sentence. "Said they lost theirs in a fire. Gave an address in Westerville. Had paperwork. Poorly faked. But it passed first glance." Cole leaned in. "Do you have footage?" The clerk smirked. "Everyone loves security footage until they're in it. I'll have it pulled." "Might take a day." Martha stood silent. The DMV felt too bright, too loud. Her ID, her face, was being used by someone else to walk into a government office and become her. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out from a side room then, a stack of folders cradled under one arm. Detective Cole? She asked crisply. He turned. Yeah? She extended a hand. Rachel Adler. I'm with the County Legal Aid Division. Clerk flagged this case for Elder Vulnerability Protocol. I've seen the flagged ID app and the file so far. If this becomes a civil matter, I'm assigned as counsel. Martha blinked. Civil? Rachel nodded. Fraud involving family often gets treated lightly in criminal court, but financial exploitation, especially when it involves vulnerable adults or property disputes, can move fast in probate. If your daughter's involved. Martha's spine straightened. We don't know that yet. No, Rachel said evenly. But if she is, court will matter more than anger. Cole gave a low whistle. She's good, he said to Martha. You want her in your corner. Rachel gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. I know how these things go. Everyone wants to keep it quiet at first, until the damage isn't quiet anymore. That evening, back in Martha's apartment, the silence felt heavier. The kitchen radio played soft jazz, but even the saxophone sounded like it was keeping a secret. Martha sat at her table again, reviewing her notes. Lines and facts, circled dates, underlined names. Every pen stroke was deliberate, every entry sharper than the last. A soft knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Grace standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, mascara smudged slightly under one eye. Can I hang here for a bit? She asked, stepping in without waiting for an answer. Mom's on the phone with some real estate lady. She thinks she's buying a condo. Martha tried to smile. Of course, sweetheart. There's leftover stew if you're hungry. Grace dropped her bag near the couch and flopped into the armchair, pulling a notebook from her hoodie. She flipped to the middle, scribbled something quickly, then tore the page out. She walked it over and placed it gently on the kitchen table in front of her grandmother. I believe you, even if no one else does. Martha's hand hovered over the paper like it was glass. Something cracked open inside her, but not in a way that hurt. It was strength, rerouted. Detective Cole slid the flash drive into Martha's old laptop with a mechanical click. The screen flickered as the video loaded. Grainy, time-stamped, the DMV lobby frozen in sterile, fluorescent limbo. Watch closely, he said. This is from 2 days ago. Martha leaned forward, jaw tight, heart hammering. Rachel Adler sat beside her, arms crossed, composed as ever. A woman stepped into frame. Tall, maybe early 40s, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, oversized sunglasses, and a casual hoodie slung over designer leggings. Martha's lips parted. She's not even trying to look like me, she whispered. Cole clicked pause just as the woman handed over a stack of forged documents. Her name is Cheryl Dietz, he said. Friend of Anna's, at least on social. Plenty of tagged photos together. Weddings, wine nights, pool parties. We're still digging, but Cheryl's got a record. Petty theft, credit card fraud, nothing major. Until now, Rachel leaned in. Does she live with Anna? Cole shook his head. No, but she listed Anna and Kyle's address on the fake paperwork. Silence dropped into the room like a stone into water. Martha stared at the paused image, Cheryl's hand mid-motion, her ID, Martha's ID, in her fingers. She used my name, Martha said quietly, but she did it from my daughter's house. Cole nodded. That's how this builds. One connection at a time. By noon, they were seated in Rachel's downtown office. Martha, Betty, and Grace, who had skipped school with minimal protest from Martha and zero resistance from Rachel. Rachel laid out the papers slowly, her words as sharp as her blazer. This is a revocable living trust. We name you as grantor. You'll transfer ownership of your assets, checking, savings, car title, apartment lease, into the trust. Grace becomes your successor trustee. Betty raised an eyebrow. That's lawyer talk for shielding everything before someone else tries to take it, Rachel replied. Martha looked over at Grace. The girl sat up straighter than usual, as if something inside her had finally settled. You sure about this? Martha asked. Grace nodded without hesitation. I'm not letting Mom touch anything of yours. Ever again, Martha signed the paperwork slowly, deliberately. Her name, her pen, her choice. Rachel added the final signature with a flourish and passed the document to the notary waiting outside the room. Martha exhaled, her hands still flat on the table. She wanted me helpless, she said, voice like gravel. Now I'm shielded. Betty smiled, but there was no victory, just preparation. That's the beginning, she said, not the end. Back at the apartment, Martha folded the newly notarized documents into a locking file box she hadn't opened in years, the one with Kyle's old birthday card, her original lease agreement, and a pressed napkin from her retirement party. Everything else went into the trash. As she bent to shut the box, Grace's voice came from behind her. "I think Mom knows you're fighting back." Martha didn't turn around. "What did she say?" "Nothing direct, but she's on the phone a lot, and she keeps asking me where I've been. She even tried to look through my texts." Martha finally stood, closing the box with a soft click. "You're not her spy," she said. Grace's eyes welled for just a moment. "She said you'd fall apart without her." Martha stepped forward and cupped her granddaughter's cheek with a hand that didn't shake. She was wrong. Later that evening, the streetlights outside blinked on, casting faint gold over the living room. Betty was back, feet up on the coffee table, glass of boxed wine in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She tapped her ash into an empty jelly jar. "What's next?" she asked. Martha didn't hesitate. "We find out how deep this goes." She opened her notebook to a fresh page. Her handwriting was smaller now, tighter. Precise. Cheryl Dietz. Known fraud. Anna's address used. Red purse equals possible stolen purchase. Trust filed. Assets protected. She underlined the word protected. The envelope was thick and official, the kind of mail that always felt heavier than paper should. Martha found it wedged between an auto insurance flyer and a coupon booklet, her name printed in bold legal font. She sat on the couch, opened it slowly, and read the first line. "Petition for legal guardianship of Martha Jennings." Her hands stilled. The room seemed to still with them. "Are you kidding me?" Betty snapped, reading over her shoulder. "She filed for guardianship? Anna thinks she can own you?" Martha didn't answer. Her jaw clenched as her eyes scanned the document. Allegations of mental decline, inability to manage finances, increased paranoia, risk to personal welfare. "I took a walk yesterday," she whispered. "I cooked dinner, balanced my checkbook. And this says I can't manage my life?" "It's not about managing," Betty said. "It's about control. She couldn't steal from you while you were lucid, so now she's trying to erase that part too." Rachel Adler read the petition in her office, her lips tight, her knuckles pale against the manila folder. "This isn't subtle," she said. "She's alleging incompetence, citing emotional instability and erratic behavior, which I assume means you called the cops and hired a lawyer." Martha folded her hands. "Is this serious?" Rachel nodded. "In Ohio?" "Absolutely. If the judge sees any sign of decline, guardianship can be granted. That would give Anna full legal access to everything you own. She could revoke the trust, liquidate your assets, even determine where you live. I won't let that happen." "Then we get ahead of it," Rachel said, pulling out a brochure. "I'm scheduling you for an independent competency evaluation. You'll walk in sharp and walk out protected." The evaluation took place 2 days later in a quiet clinic in Clintonville. The doctor was kind but thorough. Short-term memory, reasoning tasks, daily function questions. Martha completed each one with calm efficiency, even when asked to count backward from 100 by 7. When it ended, she tucked the results under her arm and walked out with her chin high. She wasn't just proving herself to the system, she was proving it to the version of Anna that lived in her head. The one who had stopped seeing her as a person the moment she became inconvenient. Meanwhile, Detective Cole's evidence binder was thickening. He brought over copies of every fraudulent transaction tied to Martha's bank account, each receipt a breadcrumb pointing back to Cheryl Dietz. Surveillance footage, witness logs, a cashier who recognized Anna from a visit the day Cheryl used Martha's card. "This is no longer just suspicion," Cole said. "We're moving into prosecutable territory." Martha didn't smile. She nodded once. Cole looked at her a moment. "You're handling this better than most." "I've delivered bad news to strangers for 17 years, she said quietly. "But I never thought I'd be on the other end of it. Not from my own blood." That evening, Grace stormed into the apartment, cheeks flushed, fists balled. "She filed for guardianship? She's calling you senile? What the hell is wrong with her?" Martha gently motioned for her to sit. "Grace, I'm okay." "No, you're not." Grace paced, hair flying from her ponytail. "She's acting like you're some confused little old lady who can't make toast. She's lying in court filings and Kyle just lets her." As if summoned, the door creaked open. Kyle stood there, pale, hands stuffed deep in his hoodie pocket. "I need to talk to you," he said, voice low. Grace folded her arms. Unless you're here to stop Mom, don't bother. I'm not here to defend her, he said. I didn't know she'd take it this far. Martha's eyes narrowed. But you knew something. Kyle looked at the floor. Yeah. I saw the paperwork before she filed it. I thought she was bluffing. I should have stopped her. No, Martha said evenly. You chose not to. The courtroom felt like a cathedral built for judgment. High ceilings, thick oak benches, and an air of finality that clung to the walls like smoke. The seal of the state of Ohio loomed behind the bench, polished and impersonal. Martha sat at the respondent's table in a navy suit she'd ironed twice that morning. Her hair was pinned neatly, not a strand out of place. She wasn't here to be pitied. She was here to be seen. Rachel Adler stood beside her, flipping through a worn leather case file. Stay calm. Let me do the talking until the judge addresses you. I'm not nervous, Martha replied, voice level. I'm ready. Across the aisle, Anna sat upright in a pale pink blouse that looked curated for sympathy. Kyle was behind her, eyes down, jaw tight. Grace, seated next to Betty in the gallery, looked ready to spit nails. Calling case number 492G, Jennings versus Jennings, petition for guardianship, the bailiff announced. Judge Monica Hayes stepped up to the bench, early 60s, with salt and pepper curls and a look that could sand paint off a wall. She adjusted her glasses and nodded once. Miss Jennings, she said, turning to Anna. You're the petitioner. State your claim. Anna stood, papers in hand, voice soft but confident. Practice. Your Honor, my mother has become increasingly confused over the past few months. She's misplacing items, reporting imaginary crimes, and becoming paranoid toward family members, myself included. Martha didn't blink. I'm simply trying to make sure she's safe, Anna continued, eyes wide. She lives alone. She's vulnerable. And lately, she's been manipulated by people who don't have her best interests at heart. Rachel rose before Anna could sit down. We'd like to submit Exhibit A, Your Honor, an independent medical evaluation from Dr. Thomas Leland, completed 3 days ago. It states unequivocally that Miss Martha Jennings is mentally competent, financially aware, and fully capable of managing her affairs. Judge Hayes held up the report, skimming through. Her expression didn't change. Rachel stepped forward. Furthermore, the claim that Ms. Jennings is paranoid? We argue it's not paranoia, it's intuition, and it's been validated. She nodded at Detective Cole, who stood and made his way to the front. Cole's testimony was simple, methodical, and devastating. He presented transaction reports, video footage, witness statements, then he clicked play. On the screen above the bench, Cheryl Dietz appeared, her oversized sunglasses and swaggering posture unmistakable as she handed over Martha's stolen identity to the DMV clerk. And this woman, Cole said, pointing, used Miss Jennings's personal information, credit cards, and home address to attempt a fraudulent license renewal. The address she used was... He turned the page. Anna Jennings's residence. Anna's face turned crimson. Your Honor, Rachel said, rising. Again, we submit that the petitioner is not acting out of concern. She is acting out of opportunity. Miss Jennings has already filed a revocable trust, taken legal steps to protect her assets, and, unlike her daughter, has no record of deceit or fraud. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. Miss Jennings, she said, turning to Martha. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Martha stood slowly. Her voice, when it came, was clear, strong, not loud, but undeniable. I've spent my life paying bills on time, writing down everything so I wouldn't forget it, showing up early and staying late. I didn't lose my mind. I lost my purse. She paused, looking directly at Anna. And when I asked for help, I wasn't confused. I was disappointed. Anna opened her mouth, but Judge Hayes held up a hand. I didn't ask you to respond, Ms. Jennings, she said curtly. Martha continued. I'm not confused. I'm careful. That's why I'm still standing here. 3 days after the hearing, Martha sat in the conference room at Rachel Adler's law office, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the trust paperwork tucked into her purse like armor. Across from her sat Jean Traylor, a forensic accountant who looked more like a high school chemistry teacher. Round glasses, mild expression, and a briefcase filled with quiet destruction. He clicked his pen once, then pushed a slim binder across the table toward Rachel. Your instincts were correct, Jean said. There's a pattern. Rachel opened the binder and began flipping through the pages, statements, graphs, itemized ledgers. Her brows furrowed deeper with every turn. Jesus, she muttered. How long? 4 months, Jean replied. She started small. Rideshare apps, food delivery, online purchases under $100. But then it escalated. A cash transfer to a secondary account. And here, he tapped the page. A payment on a luxury spa membership. Rachel turned the binder so Martha could see. These accounts were linked to your main checking card, the one that was reported stolen. I didn't authorize any of this, Martha said, voice cold and steady. Jean nodded. We confirmed it. And the recovery team traced the IP address that authorized the transaction. It routes directly to Anna's home. Wi-Fi. Martha stared at the numbers, the silent ledger of betrayal. Line after line, transaction after transaction. She didn't speak for a long time. That night, Kyle called and asked if he could stop by. He arrived alone, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. A man rehearsing guilt. I won't stay long, he said. I just needed to say something. Martha led him into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. He didn't touch his. She used the card, Kyle said quietly. The one from your purse. She told me it was just for emergencies. Until things calmed down. Martha stared at him. What kind of emergency involves a $600 facial? Kyle flinched. I didn't know the details. I didn't ask. No, Martha said. You didn't want to know. He looked at the floor. She kept saying you'd be fine, that you wouldn't notice, that you'd forget. I noticed, Kyle nodded. And you didn't forget. The next morning, Rachel sat across from Anna's attorney in a narrow mediation room inside the courthouse annex. The woman, a sharp-jawed litigator from a private firm, was tight-lipped and defensive, but she listened as Rachel laid out the findings. You'll receive the full audit report in writing, Rachel said, voice calm but clipped. But we're making one thing clear now. Your client will repay the full sum, or we file civil charges for financial exploitation. That includes the attempted guardianship under false pretenses. And if she refuses, then we don't just drag her into court, Rachel said, leaning forward. We drag the press in with her. Later that evening, Martha sat at home with Grace beside her on the couch, their knees touching. Grace didn't say much, just rested her head against her grandmother's shoulder and scrolled quietly through her phone. Betty stood at the window, peeking through the blinds like a watchful sentry. You feel that? She asked. Martha looked up. What? The air. It's changed. Something cracked in her. Your daughter tried to walk through fire in gasoline-soaked shoes. Martha didn't smile, but something flickered in her eyes. She trapped herself, Betty added. Martha nodded. Good. Grace didn't mean to record it. Not at first. She had slipped her phone into her hoodie pocket when Anna demanded they talk in the garage. Doors down, voices bouncing off the concrete like ricocheting bullets. Grace had learned over time that with her mother, silence was never safe. It was space she filled with venom. You've picked your side, Anna snapped. Don't come crawling back when she dies and leaves you nothing. Grace stood still, fingers twitching inside her sleeves. She's manipulating you, Grace. She always has. You think she's some poor little grandma who got robbed? Please. She's old. She forgets things. I was trying to protect her. You stole from her, Grace said flatly. Anna took a sharp step forward, her tone dropping to a hiss. And if you ever give her that trust paperwork, if you help her destroy this family, I swear to God, you'll regret it. That was when Grace tapped the record button. The file was only 84 seconds long, but Rachel listened to it twice. When it finished, she clicked her pen and added a sticky note to Martha's case folder. It's enough, she said. Tone, wording, intimidation, all there. Not enough to charge her on just that, but it builds context. This goes in the file. Martha sat across from her, composed, a blue cardigan folded across her lap. She's unraveling, Rachel added. The closer we get to trial, the more pressure she'll apply. You need to be ready for escalation. I am, Martha said calmly. You sure? Because if this turns criminal, it already is criminal, Martha interrupted. Now it's just being documented. Detective Cole arrived at Martha's apartment that evening. He brought takeout from Miller's Diner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of thing you ate when the world was cold and uncertain. He played the audio file from Grace's phone on a secure recorder and nodded grimly. "She's crossing into dangerous territory," he said. "Not just morally. Legally. Witness intimidation is a red flag, especially if she keeps pushing." "What happens next?" Grace asked, curled up in the armchair with her knees to her chest. Cole glanced at Martha. "If she slips up again, we'll escalate this to the DA. But for now, this stays quiet. The more reckless she gets, the better it builds our case." Betty, perched by the window as usual, scoffed. "She's cornered. Animals get nasty when cornered." Martha sipped her tea. "She thinks she can scare me. She hasn't realized she doesn't know me anymore." Cole smiled slightly. "She will." 2 nights later, Kyle showed up again, this time unannounced, and alone. He looked thinner, like the guilt was eating him from the inside out. "I moved into a hotel," he said, barely above a whisper. "I couldn't take it anymore. She's screaming all the time, blaming me, blaming Grace. She said I'm a coward." "Are you?" Martha asked. He flinched. "I don't want to be." He looked over at Grace, whose silence was louder than anything he could have said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Kyle added. "I just wanted you to know. I'm not standing behind her anymore." Martha studied him for a long moment. "Then stop standing," she said. "Start testifying." Later, as the house grew quiet, Martha sat at the kitchen table with her notebook, one lamp glowing above her. Grace had gone to bed. Betty had gone home. The night wrapped around the windows like dark cellophane. She opened to a new page and began writing deliberately. New recording. 1:24 p.m. Anna threatens Grace. Tone. Aggressive. Implied retaliation. Kyle left Anna. Confirmed verbal abuse. May testify. At the bottom, in ink darker than the rest. The purse was just the start. She closed the notebook. Slowly. Like sealing a vault. It started with a 3-minute segment buried near the end of the 6 o'clock news. "Elder exploitation in suburbia." The headline read, with a solemn-looking anchor introducing the story over soft piano music and stock photos of aging hands and legal documents. Then the screen cut to Detective Cole outside the courthouse, giving a calm, clipped statement. "Financial abuse of seniors, especially by relatives, is more common than you think. This case was only caught because the victim fought back. No names, no faces, just words like fraud, power of attorney misuse, and identity theft." But in a city like Columbus, people connect dots quickly, especially when Anna Jennings's real estate business, Jennings Property and Design, was already teetering from bad reviews and one too many Instagram humblebrags. By morning, her inbox was flooded. By noon, her phone stopped ringing entirely. By that evening, her name was being whispered in yoga studios, bank lobbies, and school pickup lines like a modern morality tale. Martha watched the story play out with quiet stillness, the volume low on her living room TV. Grace sat beside her, arms tucked in tight, her phone vibrating nonstop with group texts and reaction memes. "They think I'm lying," she said softly. "That we made the whole thing up." "Who?" Martha asked. "Half the senior class. Jenny said her mom used to work with Mom and said she was always poised." Martha muted the TV and turned fully to face her. "And the other half?" Grace hesitated. "They're on my side. A few even told Jenny to shut up. Coach Dawson asked if you'd speak at some school event in October." Martha smiled gently. "Sounds like the tide's turning." Grace rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "It still sucks, I know," Martha said. "But you stood up. That doesn't go away." Kyle packed his things 3 days later. A duffel, a box of tools, and 2 framed photos, one of him and Grace at a softball game, the other of Martha holding Grace as a toddler on a carousel. He didn't take the wedding photo. Anna stood in the hallway, arms folded, rage simmering under a frozen smile. "You're weak." Kyle paused in the doorway. "You're not just losing the case, Anna. You're losing everything that could have protected you when it was over." She didn't answer, just slammed the door behind him like it owed her money. Back in Rachel Adler's office, Martha sat as her attorney slid a thick packet across the table. "Civil claim is filed," Rachel said. "We're going after full restitution. Every charge traced back to your accounts, every unauthorized purchase and damages for emotional distress. Based on the paper trail, it's strong." "I don't want her jailed," Martha said after a beat. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" "Her powerless," Martha said. "That's worse for someone like Anna." Rachel nodded slowly. Then we'll aim to take the leverage she clings to most, her reputation and her bank account. That night, Betty brought over champagne. Not real champagne, just a cheap, sparkling white she'd slapped a sticky note onto that read, "Vintage, Revenge." She poured 3 mismatched glasses, one for herself, one for Martha, and one for Grace, who raised it with the solemnity of a courtroom oath. "To fresh starts," Betty said, lifting her glass. "To lines drawn. To masks off." Grace smiled faintly. "To not being like her." But Martha just looked at the bubbles, swirling in the glass like a storm finally settling. Then she raised it. From purse to power. They clinked. Then Martha added, almost under her breath, "Respect is priceless." The courtroom was colder than Martha remembered. Not in temperature, but in energy. The jury box stood full now. 8 women, 4 men, all middle-aged or older. All watching with the alert stiffness of people who knew they were about to witness something ugly. Judge Hayes presided from the bench, her gavel silent but her eyes sharper than ever. Martha sat beside Rachel at the prosecution's table, her posture upright, her cardigan smooth and iron, not a hair out of place. She hadn't brought her notebook today. She didn't need to. Every detail was already carved in. The prosecutor, a lean woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, rose from her seat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "you'll hear a story of betrayal. But not the kind you see in movies. This one happens quietly, over receipts, signatures, small lies wrapped in family dinners, and it all began with a stolen purse." She clicked a remote, and a projector behind her displayed a sequence of transaction reports, then DMV footage, then a still shot of Cheryl Dietz, Anna's friend, presenting Martha's stolen ID, time-stamped, dated, damning. Detective Cole was the first to take the stand. He was calm, clinical, the kind of witness that didn't need to perform. His words were facts sharpened into weapons. "We followed the digital trail," he said. "Every fraudulent charge originated from devices connected to the Jennings household Wi-Fi." "Did the defendant offer any explanation?" the prosecutor asked. She refused to cooperate, claimed she hadn't seen the stolen ID, despite surveillance footage proving otherwise. "Is that footage in the court record?" "It is." The jury didn't look at Anna. They didn't have to. She was shifting now, subtle at first, adjusting her seat, clenching her jaw. The mask was cracking. Grace was next. She walked to the stand in a black blazer that didn't quite fit, her hair pulled back, her hands trembling slightly as she raised them for the oath. "Can you describe your relationship with your grandmother?" the prosecutor asked. "She's the only stable person I've ever had," Grace said. "She remembers everything. She writes everything down. She's not confused. She's deliberate." "And your mother?" Grace hesitated. "She changes. She flips. She threatened me when she found out I believed." Grandma gasps rippled through the gallery. Anna shot forward in her seat. "That's a lie." Judge Hayes didn't even blink. "Miss Jennings, you will not interrupt this witness again." "But she's twisting everything. She..." The judge's gavel slammed down. "One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Anna sat back, breathing hard through her nose. Martha didn't move, didn't smirk, didn't blink. She simply watched. By the end of the day, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as attorneys packed up their files. The jury was dismissed for the evening. Rachel leaned toward Martha and whispered, "She lost them today. She doesn't even know it yet." Martha didn't reply. She simply stood, nodded once to the court clerk, and exited the room with the same grace she'd entered. As she reached the courthouse steps, a voice called out behind her. It was Anna, and she wasn't alone. The jury had been out for 4 hours. Martha sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, back straight, hands folded over her purse like she was waiting for a bus, not a verdict. Her cardigan matched her eyes today, pale gray and quiet. Across from her, Grace paced. "How long does it usually take?" she asked, no one in particular. Rachel looked up from her tablet. "Depends. On what?" "On how obvious the truth is," Rachel said with a slight smile. "And how much they like your grandma." Betty snorted from the end of the bench, sipping gas station coffee from a styrofoam cup. "Who doesn't like Martha? Hell, I wanted to impeach that jury when I didn't see any applause after her testimony." "Betty," Martha said softly. "I'm just saying," Betty replied, raising her eyebrows. "The woman told a courtroom she didn't lose her mind, just her purse. That deserves a damn slow clap," Grace gave a half smile but kept pacing, her sneakers scuffing against the polished floor. I can't stand this, she muttered. What if it's a hung jury? What if someone believes her? Mom, I mean. She looked normal today. Polished, costume jewelry can sparkle too, Rachel said dryly. Doesn't mean it's valuable. The elevator dinged down the hall. Someone in a suit stepped out with a file in hand. Grace jumped, but it wasn't the bailiff. Back to pacing. Inside the jury deliberation room, 12 men and women passed around printout, paused the video again, asked for definitions, whispered, argued, agreed. Outside, the courthouse clock inched toward 5 p.m. The gallery had emptied. Only the essentials remained. Rachel, the prosecutor, a court clerk with a schedule to keep, and a vending machine that refused to take crumpled bills. The prosecutor approached Martha gently. They're being thorough, she said, offering a bottle of water. Which, in our case, is a good sign. Juries that argue about small things often agree on the big ones. Martha took the bottle. Thank you. You don't seem nervous, the prosecutor observed. I've lived through worse, Martha said. If I can survive childbirth and 35 winters in Ohio, I can survive a little justice system. As the sun dropped low in the sky, golden light filtered through the courthouse windows. Betty leaned toward Martha and whispered like they were in church. She's going to lose. You know that, right? Martha nodded once. But even if she doesn't, Betty continued, she'll still be her. And you'll still be you. Martha's eyes welled for half a second, just enough for the words to register. Then she nodded again. I know. At exactly 5:42 p.m., the courtroom doors swung open. Everyone stood. The jury has reached a verdict, the bailiff announced. Rachel's hand found Martha's shoulder briefly, firm, grounding. Grace stopped breathing. The judge returned. The clerk took her seat. The room stilled. Martha walked back to the table slowly, each step measured. The jury filed in, 12 faces, unreadable. The clerk took a sheet from the foreperson, walked it to the judge, passed it back, then read, "We the jury find the defendant Anna Jennings guilty on all counts." The words echoed in the courtroom like a gunshot through stained glass. Anna didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She didn't move. She just sat there, stone-faced, lips pressed white, as if reality had knocked on the door and she was still deciding whether to answer it. Judge Hayes nodded once, slowly, then looked over the rim of her glasses. Thank you. The court thanks the jury for their service. Please remain seated as we move to sentencing. Rachel leaned over and whispered, this next part is just the beginning. Martha didn't blink. She just kept her hands folded and her breathing even. Grace, sitting 2 rows behind, finally exhaled. 10 minutes later, the courtroom reconvened. The jury dismissed. The sentencing phase underway. Anna stood now, flanked by her attorney, expressionless, pale. A woman unrecognizable from the polished, performative mother who once tossed around words like concern and confusion to win sympathy. The prosecutor approached the lectern. Your Honor, we request full restitution for all verified fraudulent charges, as well as permanent revocation of any and all legal authority Ms. Jennings has, or attempted to acquire, over the victim's person or estate. Judge Hayes turned to Rachel. Counselor Adler, do you have anything to add? Rachel stood, smooth and calm as ever. Only that this case has shown not just financial malice, but calculated manipulation of the court system itself. Miss Jennings weaponized the guardianship process in an attempt to discredit and disempower her own mother. The court has a duty to ensure that she never holds such authority again. The judge nodded. Anna's attorney rose. Your Honor, while we respect the jury's decision, we request leniency in sentencing. Miss Jennings has no prior criminal record and is the mother of a minor. Judge Hayes looked unimpressed, and that didn't stop her from attempting to exploit her own mother under oath in this very courtroom. She adjusted her glasses again and looked straight at Anna. You're sentenced to 12 months of supervised probation, the judge said. You will repay the full restitution, $27,436.19, to Ms. Martha Jennings. You are permanently stripped of any guardianship rights, including power of attorney, and may not reapply for such rights in any jurisdiction in this state. Your name is to be removed from all accounts, trusts, or medical decision-making authorities related to the victim. Anna flinched. Slight, but enough. You may be family by blood, Judge Hayes added, but that doesn't make you family by action. Kyle sat in the back, silent. His posture was rigid, eyes locked on the bench, not his wife. His jaw twitched, but his mouth never opened. Grace noticed, but she didn't care. She was already moving, rushing down the aisle the moment the gavel fell, ignoring every stare and whisper. She reached Martha and threw her arms around her so hard and fast that Martha actually staggered a step. I knew it, Grace whispered fiercely. I knew they'd believe you. Martha smiled into her granddaughter's hair. They believed us. In the hallway, Betty waited with her arms crossed and her mouth already forming the words. From victim to damn victor, she declared as Martha approached. Now someone get this woman a decent drink. Martha laughed. For real. For the first time in weeks. And it wasn't brittle. It wasn't exhausted. It was whole. Rachel caught up beside her and handed her an envelope. Certified court copy of the judgment. Full restitution. Protective orders. Everything's in writing now. Martha nodded. No more threats? Rachel's smile was cool. If she tries again, it won't be civil court she answers to. Martha looked at the envelope in her hand. It felt heavier than it should. Not because of fear, because of closure. She drew in a slow breath and released it, shoulders finally relaxing. For the first time since that damn purse went missing, she felt her lungs fill without ache. Martha unwrapped the new purse slowly, as though it might hold something sacred. It was nothing flashy, just a sturdy zip-top crossbody in soft charcoal leather, with a smooth strap and no fancy labels. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't loud, but it was hers. Chosen, not gifted. Purchased, not stolen. Grace stood nearby, tearing the tag off and adjusting the strap with the kind of care usually reserved for something far more delicate. I checked all the compartments, she said, even the little inside zipper. No holes. Good, Martha replied, her voice soft. I think I'm done with holes. They stood together in the living room, afternoon sun casting lazy rectangles across the carpet. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and lemon. Grace's doing. She'd insisted on lighting a candle to clear out courtroom energy. On the coffee table lay an organized spread of documents, folders, and envelopes, all color-coded now. Green for financial, blue for legal, yellow for medical. Martha had always been tidy, but Grace had brought order to chaos in a way only someone young and fiercely devoted could. You don't have to keep doing this, Martha said gently. I know you've got a life outside all this. Grace looked up. You are my life. Martha didn't argue. She just reached out and gently squeezed her granddaughter's hand. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. Betty came in wearing a windbreaker over her nightgown and carrying a cake box from Miller's Diner. Peach upside down, she announced. I told them I needed something celebratory, but not smug. She set it on the table and pulled out 3 forks. You're early, Martha said with a smile. Please, I've been parked in your lot since noon. I'm not missing the closing credits of this saga. Grace laughed and lit a tea candle under the cake, like it was a birthday. Betty raised her fork. To freedom, to peace, and to never, ever letting some Prada-worshipping narcissist gaslight you again. They clinked forks like champagne flutes. By early evening, the apartment had settled into a warm hum. Dishes rinsed, papers stacked, cake half-eaten. Then came the second knock. Rachel stood in the doorway with a slim binder and a neutral expression that gave way to the faintest smile. Last round of signatures, she said, stepping inside. Final filing, certified protection orders. It's all official. She sat at the kitchen table while Martha signed in her steady hand. There, Rachel said, closing the binder. Case closed. Martha leaned back in her chair, her voice barely above a whisper. Case closed. Grace repeated it quietly like a mantra. Rachel stood to leave, but paused. Martha, not many people would have fought this hard, and fewer would have done it with as much dignity. It wasn't about dignity, Martha said, folding her hands. It was about reminding her I still existed. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees and streetlights blinked awake, the apartment was quiet again. Martha moved slowly through the room, straightening cushions, folding the throw blanket over the back of the sofa, placing her new purse by the door like a small badge of survival. Grace had fallen asleep on the couch, phone still in her. Betty had left humming Stand By Your Man off key. Rachel was probably halfway back to her office already. Martha stood alone for the first time in days. Not lonely, just still. She poured herself a cup of chamomile tea and stepped out onto the small balcony. The evening air was crisp but forgiving, the city buzzing faintly beneath a pink-streaked sky. For once, nothing felt missing. The ballroom at the Columbus Senior Advocacy Center was modest, paneled in honey-toned wood with a podium, framed by dusty velvet drapes. Rows of folding chairs stretched toward the back, filled with retirees, social workers, caregivers, and community lawyers. The sign above the stage read, "Elder Rights Are Human Rights, Annual Advocacy Summit." Martha stood backstage holding a single sheet of paper. She hadn't written a full speech, just some points, but the words in her bones were heavier than anything on the page. Grace waited nearby in a blue dress she'd ironed that morning, sitting with Betty in the second row. Betty had smuggled in a flask and a cough drop, just in case the event ran long. The MC stepped aside and announced into the mic, "Our next speaker fought a quiet battle with loud consequences. Please welcome." Miss Martha Jennings' applause rose like a gentle wave. Martha stepped forward. Her steps were careful, steady. She wore a tailored slate blazer and soft-soled shoes that didn't click when she walked. The microphone was too low. She adjusted it without asking for help. She cleared her throat. "I want to talk about a purse," she said. A soft laugh moved through the crowd, confused and curious. "Not a symbol," she clarified. "An actual purse. Black leather, broken zipper, the kind you don't notice until it's gone." Grace smiled. "Last fall, I went grocery shopping like I always do. My purse was stolen. I thought it was a stranger, maybe someone in the parking lot, but the stranger lived in my bloodline." The room stilled. "My daughter used that purse to become me. She took my cards, my ID, my name. She tried to take my autonomy, and when I called her for help, she told me to figure it out." Martha paused. "I did." She looked around the room, at the gray heads, the weathered faces, the folded arms of people who had been overlooked too many times. "I want to be clear about something," Martha said. "Aging doesn't mean vanishing. Forgetting things doesn't mean I've forgotten myself. And love, real love, doesn't come with a withdrawal form." Applause broke out, not loud, not thunderous, but real. She leaned into the mic. "You don't need to yell to fight. Sometimes, the quietest people write the loudest verdicts." Grace's eyes were full now. Betty whispered, "That's my girl," and unscrewed her flask. "I was lucky. I had support. A good detective, a better lawyer, a granddaughter who saw the truth even when it hurt." She glanced at Grace, who beamed and wiped at her cheek. "But not everyone gets that. Some of you might be sitting here thinking you'd never have the strength. Let me tell you something. Strength doesn't feel like strength when it's happening. It feels like surviving. Until one day, it feels like a win." The applause was stronger now. Martha folded her notes slowly and tucked them in her pocket. "From the moment I reported my card stolen to the day I watched my daughter lose in court, I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for something harder to define, harder to replace." She paused. "Respect. A final breath. Respect doesn't age." The applause erupted fully now. Firm, rising, sustained. Grace stood. Betty stood. A few others followed. Not everyone, but enough. Martha stepped back from the mic. Rachel was near the side of the stage, arms crossed, nodding slightly. As Martha walked toward the steps, someone handed her a small token from the Advocacy Center, a pin in the shape of a key. She looked at it, then at Grace, who met her with outstretched arms. Betty handed her a breath mint wrapped in foil. "From purse strings to power," she whispered, grinning. Martha just smiled. As the applause faded, she reached the final stair, turned briefly back toward the room, and said one last thing. Not to the mic, not to the crowd, but to herself. "And when my daughter told me to figure it out," she stepped down, her voice steady, unbroken, "I did. And I figured her out too."